The 10 popes with the shortest pontificates in history. Number 10. Pope John Paul I pontificate of 33 days. August 26th to September 28th, 1978. John Paul I, born Albino Luciani in the Veneto region, was a pope who embodied the hope of a renewed, humble church close to the people. His election, following the death of Paul VI, was seen as a breath of simplicity within the walls of the Vatican. Known for his serene smile, his pastoral tone, and his accessible style, Luciani broke several protocols. He refused to wear the papal tiara, preferred to speak in the singular, and displayed an affectionate closeness that disconcerted many traditionalists. In less than a month, he won the affection of millions, and was affectionately called the Smiling Pope. Despite not publishing encyclicals or making any high-impact appointments, in just 33 days he revealed a profound agenda of changes that many sensed but few saw in action. His death, which occurred in the early hours of September 29, 1978, caused a worldwide uproar. The official announcement referred to an acute myocardial infarction, but the lack of an autopsy, the confusion in the initial statements, and the manipulation of the place of death generated countless theories, from medical errors to plots linked to internal reforms at the Vatican Bank. The truth is that his sudden death cut short one of the shortest yet most symbolic pontificates of the 20th century. He was a pope who needed no time to impress the hearts of the faithful. His successor, John Paul II, adopted his name as a gesture of spiritual continuity, making it clear that, although his reign was short, the legacy of his pastoral spirit did not die with his departure. Number 9. Pope Leo XI, 27-day pontificate. April 1 to 27, 1605. Alessandro Ottaviano de' Medici was born in Florence in 1535, a member of the illustrious Medici family that had dominated the politics and culture of the Italian Renaissance. A man of deep faith, a skilled diplomat, and with an impeccable reputation, he was elected pope on April 1, 1605. His election came after tense negotiations between pro-Spanish and pro-French factions within the conclave, and his moderate profile made him the ideal candidate to avoid a political rupture in the church. He was an experienced cleric, with a long career as nuncio to France and Archbishop of Florence, admired for his serene, prudent, and conciliatory nature. Expectations surrounding his pontificate were high. He was expected to strike a balance between doctrinal firmness and European diplomacy in particularly delicate times. But his body could not withstand the burden of the papacy. A few days after his coronation, he contracted a severe respiratory infection, probably pneumonia, aggravated by the fatigue of the ceremonies and the cold of the Roman spring. He died on April 27th, just 27 days after his election, leaving behind a sense of frustration and sadness. In his brief time on the throne of St. Peter, he had no opportunity to issue encyclicals or convene synods, but he managed to earn the respect of the Curia and foreign powers. He was nicknamed the Pope of Tears, not only for his melancholic gaze, but also for the grief his death caused among those who saw him as a promise of stability and renewal. His pontificate remained a brief but respected anecdote in the history of the Vatican's most ephemeral leaders. Number 8. Pope Pius III, 27-day pontificate. September 22nd to October 18, 1503. Francesco Todeschini Piccolomini was born in Siena in 1439, the nephew of Pope Pius II, from whom he inherited not only his adopted surname but also a solid, humanist, and deeply ecclesial upbringing. He was a respected cardinal for decades, committed to moderation, political balance, and the defense of canon law. In a period marked by scandal and corruption during the papacy of Alexander VI, Rodrigo Borgia, his election as Pope Pius III was greeted with relief by many ecclesiastical circles who saw him as a figure of reconciliation. At 64, he did not aspire to power, but accepted the tiara as a gesture of obedience and commitment to a peaceful transition for the Church. His election was perceived as a bridge between the turbulent papacy that was ending and a possible period of moral cleansing. However, from the very day of his appointment, his health proved to be compromised. Suffering from gout and in advanced physical decline, Pius III could barely function as pontiff. He held no important public ceremonies or issued any relevant documents. He died just 27 days after his election, without having been formally crowned. Some later accounts hinted at the possibility of poisoning, although the official version always attributed his death to natural causes. His funeral was modest, and his memorial service discreet. Even so, many historians consider him an honorable pope, whose mere presence symbolized the desire to restore papal dignity to a Rome desperately in need of redemption. His death paved the way for the rise of Pope Julius II, beginning a new chapter in Renaissance ecclesiastical politics. Number 7. Pope Damasus II, 24-day pontificate, July 17th to August 9th, 1048. Papa of Brixen, who would later take the name Damasus II, was born in Bavaria and served as Bishop of Brixen before his brief ascension to the papal throne. His election was not the result of religious consensus, but a direct appointment by Emperor Henry III of the Holy Roman Empire, who sought to restore imperial control over the Roman See in an era dominated by chaos and simony. 11th century Rome was in turmoil, shaken by warring aristocratic factions and the return of deposed popes such as Benedict IX, who had been installed and expelled several times. Amid this turmoil, Damasus II was appointed as a temporary solution that embodied the imperial will to purify the Church. Although he initially encountered opposition in Rome, he was finally enthroned after arduous negotiations with local barons and the military intervention of the emperor. However, the new pope had little time to stabilize the situation. Shortly after his arrival in the Eternal City, he traveled to the region of Palestrina, where he fell seriously ill. 24 days after his election, he died under circumstances still debated by historians. Some accounts attribute it to malaria, a common illness during Roman summers. Others, without conclusive evidence, suggest the possibility of poisoning linked to his political enemies. Whatever the cause, his death marked a new stage in the struggle to free the papacy from the domination of Roman noble families and secular manipulation. Despite his short-lived pontificate, Damasus II was recorded as one of the symbols of the transition toward the Gregorian reform, which would change the course of the medieval church just decades later. Number 6. Pope Marceline II, 21-day pontificate, April 9th to May 1st, 1555. Marcello Cervini was a Renaissance scholar, deeply committed to Christian humanism, ecclesiastical reform, and doctrinal integrity. Born in Montefano in 1501, he actively participated in the Council of Trent, where he defended the need for a more coherent, disciplined church closer to biblical sources. He was a man of letters, a promoter of culture, and distinguished by his rectitude and personal austerity. When he was elected pope with the name Marceline II, he became one of the few pontiffs to retain his given name, an unusual gesture that was interpreted as a reaffirmation of identity and moral consistency. His election was enthusiastically received by sectors that yearned for a firm continuation of the Counter-Reformation without falling into authoritarian extremes or corrupt concessions. But the burden of the pontificate soon became an impossible weight to bear. Political pressure, internal tensions within the Curia, and the delicate European situation undermined his already fragile health. Marceline II, the victim of a stroke, died just 21 days after being elected. Despite the brevity of his pontificate, he left behind a written testament of enormous lucidity, in letters and speeches that revealed his intention to promote a more cultured and responsible clergy, as well as a church that set a true moral example. His death was deeply mourned by the Catholic reformers of the time, who saw in him a figure of transition between the decadent past and a purified church. Although he did not govern long enough to carry out his plans, his figure remains a symbol of the enlightened, humble, and authentic pontiff he could not be. Number 5. Pope Cisinus, 21-day pontificate, January 15th to February 4th, 708. Cisinus, known in Latin as Cisinus, was elected pope at a time of growing tension between Rome and Constantinople. Of Syrian origin, he had served as a priest in Rome for years, and his reputation was that of a pious man, firm in his faith, and deeply committed to defending Catholic orthodoxy against the threat of monothelitism, a heresy that denied the duality of wills in Christ. Despite suffering from severe gout and being almost completely immobilized, his prestige among the clergy and people was such that his election was swift and unanimous after the death of John VII. His appointment represented the continuity of a firm doctrinal spirit and a church that sought to resist both the influence of the Byzantine Empire and the internal conflicts that weakened papal authority in Rome. As soon as he assumed the papacy, he ordered restoration work on the city walls to protect it from Lombard attacks and organized the shipment of supplies to areas affected by shortages. His will was iron, but his body would not support it. He was unable to celebrate solemn mass or preside over public audiences, and only managed to issue a few administrative decrees before falling seriously ill. He died just 3 weeks after his election, on February 4, 708, leaving no visible mark in terms of doctrine or policy. However, his brief pontificate is remembered for his example of humbly accepting responsibility and for having attempted, with his limited strength, to strengthen the integrity of a church surrounded by external conflicts and internal illnesses. He was a man who, even limited by pain, did not refuse to serve. Number 4. Pope Theodore II, 20-day pontificate, December 897. Theodore II was elected during a particularly chaotic period for the Church, just after the scandalous episode known as the Cadaver Synod, in which the deceased Pope Formosus was exhumed, dressed in papal robes, tried for heresy, and thrown into the Tiber by order of Stephen VI. The Church was mired in disrepute, violence, and manipulation by Roman noble families, who used the papacy as a tool of political power. In this turbulent context, Theodore II was seen as a figure of reconciliation, a transitory but necessary pontiff to restore order and dignity to the Apostolic See. Despite his brief pontificate, he was a determined man with a clear vision to heal the scandal, repair the damage, and restore solemnity to the throne of St. Peter. During his mere 20 days of reign, he annulled the decrees of the previous synod, restored Formosus's rights as the legitimate pope, and ordered his remains recovered from the river for proper burial in St. Peter's Basilica. These gestures were deeply symbolic and necessary at a time when the Church was morally decayed. No doctrinal writings or structural reforms are known from his brief pontificate, but his role was crucial as a figure of transition and restoration. He died suddenly, and although some ancient chroniclers hinted at violent causes, the most widely accepted version is that he died of illness. Theodore II was one of those popes whose brief appearance was sufficient to mark a spiritual turning point. His pontificate, though fleeting, put an end to one of the most grotesque episodes of the papacy and ushered in a period of temporary calm amidst anarchy. Number 3. Pope Celestine IV, 17-day pontificate, October 25th to November 10th, 1241. Goffredo Castiglione, who would later adopt the name Celestine IV, was elected pope after one of the most tense and chaotic conclaves of the Middle Ages. The throne of St. Peter had been empty for almost 2 months after the death of Gregory IX, and the cardinals, imprisoned by order of the Roman Senate, found themselves under unsanitary conditions and constant surveillance. The conclave was convened in a besieged Rome, in the midst of a standoff between the Holy See and Emperor Frederick II, who was pressuring the cardinals to impose a pontiff favorable to his interests. The confinement lasted weeks, and many of those present fell ill from the lack of ventilation, clean water, and adequate food. Finally, on October 25, 1241, Castiglione, an elderly and weakened man, was elected as a temporary solution to the political crisis. Celestine IV was never crowned. A few days after his election, he fell gravely ill, weakened by confinement, stress, and age. He died on November 10th, just 17 days after being proclaimed pope. His pontificate, although officially valid, was purely nominal. He had no time to make significant decisions or form an ecclesiastical government, and his name barely appears in papal documents. Nevertheless, his death marked the collapse of an ecclesiastical electoral system deeply vulnerable to secular pressures, and his case contributed to the future changes that led to the creation of the conclave as we know it today. Celestine IV symbolizes the extreme to which the politicization of the papacy had reached in the 13th century, and his brief existence as pontiff reflects the physical and moral exhaustion to which the spiritual leaders of his time were subjected. Number 2. Pope Bonafice VI, 15-day pontificate, April 896. Bonafice VI was elected pope during one of the darkest moments in the history of the papacy, following the death of Pope Formosus. Late 9th century Rome was dominated by political chaos, strife between aristocratic families, and constant interference from outside powers, such as the Holy Roman Empire. The Roman clergy, divided and pressured by warring factions, hastily elected Bonafice VI, a priest who had already been suspended twice for misconduct. His reputation was questionable even among his contemporaries, making his election a clear reflection of the institutional deterioration of the Church during that period. It is believed that his appointment was more a result of political manipulation than a true spiritual or moral quest. His pontificate, which lasted barely 15 days, ended abruptly and enigmatically. Sources are scarce and contradictory. Some indicate that he died of natural causes. Others claim that he was deposed by order of the same nobles who had imposed him. What is certain is that his reign was fleeting, and he left no doctrinal, administrative, or pastoral legacy. Even his status as pope has been the subject of debate among historians, due to the irregularity of his election and his lack of moral legitimacy. His name barely appears on the official Vatican lists, and his memory was quickly eclipsed by the scandals that would continue that same year, including the grotesque posthumous trial of Pope Formosus. Bonafice VI embodies one of the most murky periods of the medieval papacy, where the tiara was an instrument of ambition rather than a symbol of holiness. Number 1. Pope Urban VII, 13-day pontificate, September 15 to 27, 1590. Giovanni Battista Castagna, elected as Urban VII, holds a unique place in church history, that of the pope with the shortest pontificate ever recorded. Born in Rome in 1521, he was a skilled diplomat, a rigorous theologian, and a man of serene character. He held important positions as Archbishop of Rossano and Nuncio to Spain, and was appreciated for his integrity and doctrinal clarity. His election, following the death of Sixtus V, generated great expectations in the Roman Curia. He represented a figure of consensus and transition at a time when Europe was shaken by religious tensions, dynastic conflicts, and the recent Council of Trent. Although his health was already showing signs of deterioration, he was almost unanimously elected by the cardinals as a leader capable of governing with common sense and moderation. However, his pontificate ended before it officially began. 12 days after his election, Urban VII contracted malaria, probably in the Vatican gardens or due to the unhealthy Roman summer. He died on September 27th, without having been crowned, without having issued a papal bull, or even having fully assumed the papal government. Even so, he managed to issue a moral edict prohibiting the use of tobacco in churches under penalty of excommunication, making him the author of one of the Vatican's first health documents. His death caused consternation and reopened a power struggle between ecclesiastical factions that would prolong the conclave for months. Urban VII was a pope who did not reign, but whose entire life was a preparation for a ministry that time denied him. He is the ultimate symbol of human fragility in the face of the weight of divine destiny.
Thank you for watching our video. Subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. Give it a like, comment your thoughts, and share this video with your friends and family.